today's episode, we are going to talk about 3 things that I had to stop telling myself in order to finally heal. I get so many questions about this, about what should I be telling myself when I'm dealing with anxiety or any other number of chronic debilitating symptoms. I did a Q&A in the bonus broadcast feed, which, by the way, is ongoing content that you get access to if you buy my course, no subscription or anything. And a surprising number of people literally asked me for this, like, what is the monologue? What exactly do I say? And I realized that it really isn't so much about what you say and getting that perfectly right, but it is a lot more to do with what are the things you need to stop saying? What are the things you need to stop believing and looping on? I know how dark this process can get, and I know how hopeless it can get, because at the beginning of my chronic pain and anxiety recovery journey, these thoughts that I'm going to talk about today are the exact thoughts that I looped on day in and day out. And because of how bad it got for me, I was actually admitted inpatient to a psychiatric hospitalization. These were the thoughts that really got me there. I'm bringing it up so that you know that I don't talk about this casually, that I know the depths of despair that you can get to, and that this stuff really matters. So I want to talk about those thoughts and why you have to stop engaging with them if you want to finally heal. The first main one, and this is the one that really got me into the position I got myself into, was the belief that I can't live like this. I personally know how true that feels, because for me, it was not a thought, it was a belief. It was something I believed with everything in me, that I can't continue life like this. And I said this constantly during my worst times. It was always looping. Anytime I noticed a symptom, it would loop and it would just be like, I can't do this. I can't live like this. I said this constantly during the worst of the worst. When I was as stuck as you could get, part of that conversation is, I can't do this. I can't live like this. And it feels very honest in the moment. I know how true that feels, because at a point, it's not a thought, it's a belief. We literally believe that if this keeps up, I can't do it. And it carries this like underlying need or demand, which is that it needs to end immediately. And any sign that it is not ending, or that, God forbid, it's possibly getting worse, it's intolerable. It's not something that we can work with, because we've told ourselves, we've put up this like boundary of, if this stays, I can't do it. I want you to know that you can acknowledge how hard something feels, because I say again and again that these situations, these symptoms, this experience in the body and in the mind is so hard and so horrific, but it doesn't make life unlivable, even with it being so hard. And we have to take accountability for the conversations that we are keeping going, because I'll tell you guys again and again, it's not so much about what you do, it's about what you stop doing. And this is the kind of flip side with the thinking specifically. It's not so much about what you tell yourself that is right. It's about what you're currently telling yourself that is keeping you where you're at. Like, can you actually stop telling yourself something that is so fear-inducing and despair-producing? Like, it's a problem because it's keeping our system feeling the highest level of terror and fear and panic. And that, as we know, keeps the symptoms going. Okay. The second sentence is, if this doesn't go away, my life is over. Which again is something that we believe. Like, we are so frantic for a solution and for a fix, because all of the rest of the time is spent saying, if this doesn't go away, my life is over. I'll never be able to be who I want to be. I'll never be able to have kids, travel, do that job, create that thing, have that experience. If this stays, my life is over. And these sentences feel so dramatic, but they feel so real when you are in the middle of all of this. They feel like the truth, and the scariest truth you could ever face. This one is kind of just one that lives underneath all of the other thoughts that we have. And again, we're looking at our life and our symptoms, and we are just bathing in the thought of everything this is stealing from me. It is stealing my life. It is. And the reason I want you to look out for these specifically is because it's painting a picture on the rest of your life based on your experience today. And you're not a fortune teller. You don't know what this is going to look like in 5 years. And because of sensitization, because your nervous system is so sensitive, it's trying to use this information to future cast and to figure out what comes next for you and what your entire infinity future is going to look like. And it's reading the situation wrong and it's going immediately to worst case scenario because that's its job. And we cannot stack this future doom scenario on top of the present moment discomfort that we're feeling right now. When I was really, really fully deeply in it, I genuinely believed that if this stayed, I was done. I couldn't figure it out with this present. And that belief alone drove utter despair. That despair was so separate from my symptoms. When we talk about that second fear or the fear that we have of the symptoms, like that for me was such a painful and unnecessary, as you'll learn in this episode, part of this process. Me painting my future in that way was 100% optional. You do not have to sit around thinking about how your life is over and how you can't live like this and all the other thoughts that I'm going to get into in this video. That's a choice. That's a choice to engage with that type of thinking. It's separate. It's separate from the physical experience. Even if the physical experience is so horrific, this is the suffering that gets added on top of it because we look at it and we're like, this is so hard. If this doesn't stop, my life is done. The catastrophe language is a big deal. And it's something that, like I mentioned, I don't think we notice that we're doing often. It gets so autopilot and so normal that the internal dialogue we have is just catastrophe, worst case scenario. And that was me. I could not see a future where what I was experiencing didn't get worse and worse and worse and worse until I died. Like I was just like, this is what my life looks like. I suffer horrifically until the day my life is done. I couldn't see anything else. I had immersed myself in the scariest content online about people who had lived with these conditions that were incurable for 30, 40 years. I was so scared and I couldn't find solutions and nobody could help me. So my brain naturally was like, there is no solution. I was committed that nobody could help me. Because I had learned from the people who have dealt with it for such a long time and were told it was incurable. And I heard about the life that they were living. And I thought, that is not the life for me. That is not, I couldn't believe that such a deep, dark reality existed. So when you're using phrases like, I'm at the end of my rope, I'm losing my mind, this is ruining everything, this is unbearable, I want you to notice that language and remember that it's optional and remind yourself like, it is livable. You're living. It is bearable. You are bearing it. We have to really separate the difference between something that is painful and hurts and really freaking sucks with something that cannot be lived with. And I know there's a difference. There's a difference between I can't live like this and I really don't like living like this. And it's okay for you to feel the second one. It's okay for you to really address that this is not the situation you would have chosen for yourself. But it is the situation that you're in. And that is why acceptance is a core of what I teach, because I came from a position of complete lack of acceptance. When I mentioned to you guys that no one thought acceptance was a worse idea than me. Now you have some more context of why that was. I did not see a way out. And I thought about it and I hyper-focused on it all day long about the fact that there wasn't. These phrases are going to feel so normalized that you're not going to register them as a choice anymore. They're going to not feel like a choice in how you're thinking. They're going to feel like the reality that you are actively living in. That doesn't make them true. And every time you repeat these catastrophic scenarios and beliefs, you are reinforcing that message to your nervous system, which is, this is dangerous. And more than that, this is catastrophic and it must stop. Can you see how much more pressure there is on needing to find a fix when you're telling yourself, I can't live like this, and if this doesn't stop, my life is over? Can you see the weight of that? Can you see the weight of that on your nervous system? And can you see how that could be preventing your healing? Because it goes directly against a healing mindset. And then we wonder, why aren't I healing? Because we're trying everything while simultaneously being like, if I don't get rid of this, if I don't find a solve for this, my life is over. Okay? So what I don't recommend, I don't recommend forcing a conversation that's like, I am safe, this is safe, I am not in danger here, especially when you don't believe it. I don't think you need to go from I'm completely hopeless to I am safe. That is a huge jump, especially if you're sensitized. Nearly impossible. I spent no time when I was desensitizing saying, I'm safe. This is safe. It didn't work. I wasn't in a place to receive that. It was a waste of my energy, and I needed the energy that I had to pour into the other aspects of what I teach here. I'm not a big fan of affirmations when you're sensitized. I love them when you're not sensitized anymore. It's not worth your time to try to override every anxious thought that you're having with something positive. Because again, your system isn't buying it. It's full-blown fight or flight sensitization. It's useless at that point for now in this phase. And you don't need to be arguing with your brain all day long. You don't need to be going back and forth or trying to prove things true or not true, or even doing much convincing to the opposite of these specific thoughts. You don't need to be like, you are bearing it. You're doing such a good job. Sometimes we can use those reminders for sure. They're quick. If you feel like you start getting into convincing energy, I want you to just make the decision to unlatch from that specific thought, as in, don't continue to engage with it. Don't use it as a suggestion of what you need to do next. It just turns into another full-time healing job and another really strong layer of trying to control your way out of this. My desensitization process did not include managing my thoughts 24/7, but I do want to talk about what actually did help when it comes to such doom and gloom and, to be honest, victim mentality and monologue that was going on in my brain 24/7 for months and months, which is what landed me in such a dark place where I saw no way out. What helped for me was the awareness of what was currently going on, what I was currently engaging with. So when I would notice a thought like, I can't live like this, if that pops up, I would decide I'm not spiraling on this anymore. And I just noticed that that was a sentence that was floating in my brain. You guys have so many questions about what to do with thoughts. Nothing. Stop engaging with them. So instead of following that thought where it led me and being like, oh my gosh, yeah, I can't live like this because if it keeps going on, then I'm going to miss this and that and that. That's the engagement. When I noticed the thought popped up, it was like, oh yeah, there's that thought again. Yeah, well, I am here. So I am living like this. It's okay. Anyways, and re-engaging with life. I would let it exist without making meaning of what it meant for me, without a verdict for what it meant for the rest of my existence. And I didn't need to have something to say that would counter it or try to prove it untrue or try to, knock the legs out from underneath it. I don't argue with my thoughts, and I don't recommend that you argue with your thoughts either. And you don't need to panic about having those thoughts. Even with me telling you, like, listen, these are thoughts that you don't want to be engaging with or having. Some of you are going to be like, now I'm going to freak out every time I have the thought because I know how damaging it is. Having the thought is not the problem. Engaging with the thought is when it becomes a problem. Taking the suggestion from the thought is what causes an actual issue. Having thoughts is not a problem. People have all different types of thoughts all day, all different types. And some of those we give weight to and other ones we just let pass. I want you to learn how to let these thoughts pass. For me, it was a lot more about less engagement with all of this, whether it was sensations or thinking, less engagement. And that shift alone softened everything a lot for me. There is a distinction here that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. Even I could do better at talking about it. Sometimes when it comes to thinking like this, we need to get a little bit more comfortable with unconditional acceptance. I think we hear a lot about radical acceptance and acceptance just in general, but a concept that I learned about was unconditional acceptance. And unconditional acceptance goes further. And I'm not going to get super in depth in that right now because it can be a bit of a wild goose chase as far as the thoughts that we have about accepting something unconditionally. But I needed to get to the point where I believed that even if this never went away, my life wouldn't be over. It wouldn't be a life that I, again, would have chosen. It wouldn't have been what I wanted in my life, but it would be what was in my life. That's the acceptance piece. The unconditional part is even if it doesn't leave, my life's not over. It's going to look different. My life will look different. It may not look the way I would have wanted it to look, but it's not over. This may not land for you yet. That's okay. It certainly did not land for me the first time I saw it. And because of that, though, that's the one that actually freed me because I stopped mentally torturing myself, trying to figure out how I was going to make it end or how I was going to make it stop. It took a lot of the pressure off of me. And I thought it would do the opposite. I thought it would really, really freak me out when I really sat with, if this doesn't go away, I'm still going to have a life to live. I'm a mom. I have kids. I have a life. It may look different than I would have wanted, but if these are the cards that I've been dealt, people accept all kinds of things that you would think and would tell yourself are unlivable. So you don't have to want it to stay. I don't expect you to want it to stay, but you do have to stop making it mean that the presence of it being here means that your life is ruined forever, especially when you're just future casting and doom casting on the future based on your current experience. Your life is not ruined because it exists, and you deserve the chance to keep holding on while you heal and while you figure it out. I can tell you from the place that I ended up, being completely hopeless and inside a hospital, the biggest thing that got me there was that I would not stop looping on this type of monologue and this type of language. This is intolerable. I can't do this. I can't live like this. If there's no solution, I'm done. That was the main focus of my thinking every single day. And if you want to heal, you have to give up that way of talking and thinking. Saying it out loud and saying it to yourself, it's the same thing. You have to give up that belief. And sometimes it can be helpful to see how life could continue even if this continues, even if it gets worse. You're not going to like it. You're not going to have to like what you're going through. It is horrific. And even something that is horrific is still bearable because you are bearing it. You're here right now watching this. You are bearing it, even if you're in a really, really challenging part of it right now. You are living with it, and you can keep hanging on while you work toward recovery. And I really feel like you need to know that no matter how dark you feel, no matter how hopeless it feels. I assure you, I was at a place where I felt like there was not one option. To me, there were no options left. And I was wrong. And it's important that you know that. It's very important that it's important to me that you know that. So when you notice thoughts like, I can't live like this, consider that perhaps a more honest version of that is, this is so uncomfortable right now. This is so hard. And when you notice thoughts like, my life is over, a more honest version might be, I don't know exactly what this ending looks like. I don't know what's in the future here. But these aren't like shiny affirmations. They are just more accurate, because we have to accept when we're sensitized that we aren't reading life accurately. We aren't getting a correct picture of what's going on. That's part of the sensitization. So the hopelessness that you feel, the despair that you feel is part of the sensitization. It's not separate from it. You are removing that layer that has everything in the future, not only unknown and uncertain, but worst thing that can happen. And we want to remove that. That takes a lot of pressure off and gives you a lot more of your energy back. And life starts to feel more bright and hopeful just because we decide to stop engaging with the doom. So acceptance in this context of these thoughts and this thinking means this is here right now. It is what I'm dealing with. This is the situation that I'm in. And I refuse to declare it the end of my existence, the end of my life, the end of what I can handle, the end of what I can bear, because your nervous system right now, it needs less alarm. You have to also understand in the context of healing that when you're looking for a solve and you're even trying any program, any technique, any protocol while bathing in doom and gloom and hopelessness and despair all day long, those are going so counterintuitively to each other, you will not make progress on your healing journey if a majority of your life is spent looping on this type of thinking. Okay, I really, really want to hammer this point home because it's that important. Sometimes that is the biggest shift that you need, is to notice, oh my gosh, the majority of my thought space is going toward hopelessness and despair. And I'm repeating it over and over. Like some people do it in YouTube comments. I mean, they tell their story again and again of how they got there and what happened and what their story is. And we all have one, right? what their story is, why they're stuck, why they have no options, why there's no hope for them, why they're at the end of their rope, why they can't do this another day. They say these very same sentences over and over and over. And I know that if they're saying that in my YouTube comments, imagine what the internal dialogue sounds like. It's probably constant. And if you can shift this, you are going to get so much closer to relief and to healing. Okay. But it's got to go. So if you are constantly asking yourself, what do I need to be saying to myself? How do I allow right? How do I accept the correct way? I want you to know this is a core aspect of resistance, because you are resisting where you're at and you're telling yourself, it is the most extreme way of telling yourself what's happening right now should not be happening. It can't be happening. And if it doesn't stop happening, I'm done. That is resistance in its most clear form, which is the opposite of acceptance, which is the thing that's going to build the foundation for you to heal. It is paramount. Okay. Let me know what resonated from this video in the comments. I would love to hear from you, and I know what's possible for you. So I want to wrap up by just saying, no matter how hopeless this gets, no matter how much despair you feel, you need to lean on the testimonies of people who have been in that place before and recovered. Because that is what is in your future, but it's not available to you while you're spinning out and looping in engagement with conversations rooted in hopelessness. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next week.